With ever heightening tensions between the US and Iran, it is very important, given our president's attitude toward the world, that there be checks on the president's power. And so there have been attempts to try to rein that in. One of the most recent attempts was an amendment that just went before the Senate today, where it did receive the majority of the votes to check the president's power. Unfortunately, in this country, that's not enough for it to actually happen. The measure, as it's written about in the Washington Post, a proposed amendment to the annual defense bill would have needed 60 votes to be included in the $750 billion authorization senators passed Thursday. The vote was 50-40, with 4 Republicans joining Democrats to support the measure. Senators Jerry Moran of Kansas, Susan Collins of Maine, Mike Lee of Utah, and Rand Paul all voted to rein the president's powers in, but it needed 60 votes to pass, so it did not. There were 10 no-shows, and we're just gonna show you the people who didn't show up. And it's for various reasons, but Democrat Chris Coons and 9 Republicans, Blackburn of Tennessee, Blunt of Missouri, Brown of Indiana, Burr of North Carolina, Kevin Kramer of North Dakota, Inhofe of Oklahoma, Pat Roberts of Kansas, Mike Rounds of South Dakota, and Rick Scott of Florida.
You would think just after that show she put on in Tennessee that Marsha Blackburn would always be there for every vote, right? I mean.
She was not there for this vote.
She went against the Swifties.
She was.
You know?
Taylor Swifties, just so people don't know.
Yes.
That she went, so from Taylor Swift
if you're lucky
to impending nuclear war.
Yes.
So, I mean, the story of people flying back from Miami in order to make the votes today was kind of fascinating. Like Gillibrand, Harris, they all flew back in order to get counted in this vote. But Maytha, what's riding on something like this?
Yeah, so this was an opportunity to stymie his recklessness, as my father says, the sanctions in chief president that we have, who also promised his base that no more wars would happen. But here's the trick of the draw that people don't identify when they're looking at congressional declaration of war or have the Congress having power to declare war, is that the US government has redefined the terms of war. So they'll call something like this military engagements, and they do so in this bill that was voted down. They don't say that they would stop war, they would stop military operations or put a check that Congress needs to declare it. And so actually, this could have been an opportunity to do that, and now you get more of a carte blanche. And I just wanna kind of go back to this idea of war and military operations, because it's what allowed us to skate through so many wars. Do you know when the last time Congress actually declared war?
Oh my God, it was before Vietnam, Korea?
1942, Hungary, Romania, and is it Romania? I think it was.
So it was World War II.
It was World War II. Sorry, Bulgaria, Hungary,
that.
and Romania. And before that, they declared like 10, 11 wars. And then anything after that, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf, all of that was executive branch.
Right.
And they passed it through by calling it things like sustained counterterrorism strategy, targeted action, extended systematic campaigns. And so, another favorite is what they call this extended military engagement.
Right, extended military engagement, which is a fancy way of saying war. You heard police action before.
Right.
But this would be a military strike against a nation.
Right.
They're trying to find ways around it. It seems very obvious to me when they're like, well, the Revolutionary Guard is technically a terrorist organization. That's our end.
Right.
Because we know, what's frustrating to me is it's all like the most recent iteration, what you're talking about is the war on terror.
Absolutely.
And they're trying to find a way to use the war on terror, this kind of concept of Muslims do it. Oh, wow, Iran is a Muslim nation. Oh, I think I did enough math to get it by my people in America.
But they've always been doing this shifting of the bullseye, right? So it goes from like Al-Qaeda, and then they came up with a terrorist group in Iran called Husharan, which was a wheat. In a city in Iran. So they said that was a scary group. And then they said clearly ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call it. And then that was the fear for me about the war on terror and the Bush presidency, was that it really, like I said, gave a carte blanche to any military campaign action abroad to be justified as a protection against terrorism that would hit us, right? And as we know, most of the terrorism in that region affects people in that region. It doesn't affect us. It's very rare that something comes our way. But also, the Bush presidency expanded the power of the executive branch. extensively. And so I think that's what we have to contend with, is he's operating in that presidency. So the horror of Trump is only expounded by the fact that he's been positioned through other administrations to have his reckless behavior, an open door policy on it.
Yeah. So here's how Mitch McConnell, who he's so graciously allowed this vote to even take place, praise be, here's how he characterized it. Take a look.
Number one, nobody's advocating going to war with Iran. Not the president, not the Secretary of State, none of the generals, no one. So I'll be opposing the Udall Amendment. We're not opposed to having the vote, and we are working on having that vote, passing NDAA, and doing the supplemental, as I said earlier, all this week. And I don't think it's good for this country to see the Iranians observing us arguing over all this either. So my hope is that it will be defeated. We'll find out by how much of a margin, but we hope to defeat it. It's simply not required under this set of circumstances.
And what a fearless leader. But that's such a weird position to be like, I'm allowing this to take place, and basically saying, the president is not, I don't want a war in Iran, but I'm going to just leave the door open to extended engagements and willy-nilly declarations of non-war by the president.
I just want to add to, I think people don't understand that sanctions, and especially our sanctions, are also a declaration of war on people, right? It might not be directly in terms of a military campaign, but people feel that. People are dying from sanctions, and they had been in Iraq. Over 1 million people died from our sanctions. And putting sanctions on Iran will also do that. So we, whether we like it or not, are in war with Iran, and some degree of it that we might not recognize.
Yeah, and it's just so frustrating that all the trappings of the previous administration that started stuff like this with ways that were professed to be one way but turned out to be another. It's Bolton and he's there.
Yeah.
And that same group of folks is behind it all, and it's not even doing us the courtesy of changing up their tactics.
Yeah.
Like, I really wish that they did that. And just at least tell me it's different. I do want to say that now that it's voted down, the House will have an opportunity to put something like this forward. It will likely pass in the House because the Democrats by and large voted for this. I do want to say, like, people like Rand Paul who are like, I don't want to be fighting anybody, did get involved, and I think that's where there is some give and take to be had. Plus 10 senators at least didn't vote no, they just didn't show up, as we said. Tim Kaine, who co-authored the Senate's Iran amendment, surmised that it stood a good chance of being included in the final product because of the fact that we did get a majority in the Senate and we're going to get a strong vote in the House. So gone but not forgotten, but then they voted, with similar situations. Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders voted to stop, spearheaded the effort to stop involvement in Yemen, passed, vetoed.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.